I've got something important to talk about. What? Oh, you did say you had a lot to talk about when you got back, didn't you? Yeah. I want a divorce. What? Why all of a sudden? This is too sudden and too one-sided, isn't it? While undergoing treatment for cervical cancer, my husband suddenly demanded a divorce. I was completely panicked, not understanding the reason for the divorce at all. He did explain the reason for the divorce to try and clear up my confusion, but it was an utterly unreasonable one. It's because I've found someone I love more than you, understand? It seems he plans to leave me for a 19-year-old woman. I don't mind if we get divorced. But divorce isn't like a romance, where you can just say goodbye and that's that. I understand what you're thinking. But you can't just decide on a divorce right now, can you? Let's talk this through. Why? No matter how much we talk, my feelings won't change. Just give up and let's get a divorce. It's not about that. If the love is gone, we can't stay married, can we? I won't do anything. He started to act out, thinking he was some kind of hero, protecting the woman he loves. I was already irritated at being presented with a divorce for such an unreasonable reason, but being talked to as if I were some monster obstructing his love path only made me more irritated. I'm sure if he says one more irritating thing, I won't be able to hold back. You know you're at a higher risk of early childbirth and miscarriage after the surgery for cervical cancer, right? That's basically the same as being infertile. No value in a woman who's infertile. I'm gonna remarry a cute 19-year-old. He stepped on a massive landmine. These were words that should never be said, not here, not anywhere. I'll pack my bags. I decided to not have any discussions and leave the house. At that moment, if he had calmed down even a little and tried to stop me, he wouldn't have ended up regretting it so much. 3 days after I left the house, I was called to the hospital because there was something about my husband. Since the divorce hadn't been finalized, I reluctantly headed to the hospital. When I arrived, there he was, sitting in a chair, frozen, his face pale as a ghost. I'm glad you could come right away. What's wrong? Did something happen? Yes. Your husband, actually. He collapsed to his knees. It seems a massive divine punishment had come down on him. My name is Michelle. I'm a 27-year-old office worker. I married Kyle last year, and it's almost been a year since we got married. Kyle works at a supermarket as an employee, taking care of the produce section. We met 3 years ago, at his workplace, but my first impression of him wasn't very good. What should I make for dinner tonight? I'm too tired to think. Maybe I'll just buy some cheap vegetables and make a stir-fry like usual. Exhausted from work, I decided on the dinner menu in my head. Being familiar with the supermarket, I knew exactly where everything was. I headed straight for the stable and cheap vegetables. On the way, I noticed that cabbage was on sale, which stopped me in my tracks. I can't finish it by myself, though. It's a good deal, isn't it? The price goes back tomorrow, so you'd better buy it now. It is good for your skin because it has vitamin C, and it's also good for your bones because it contains vitamin K and calcium. Oh, yes. Thank you. I wasn't expecting to be approached by a store employee, so when Kyle suddenly spoke to me from behind, I jumped. Turning around, he continued to extol the virtues of cabbage to me, ignoring my bewildered expression, like he was a sales clerk in a clothing store. Not knowing how to respond, I nodded politely, put a head of cabbage in my cart, and walked away. After that day, whenever Kyle saw me in the store, he would always recommend vegetables to me. Eventually, he started talking about things other than vegetables, like his job and his life, and began asking about mine, eventually inviting me out for a meal. Essentially, Kyle was hitting on me. The idea of being hit on by a man who was hitting on a customer during work hours left a bad impression on me. However, he kept inviting me out, so on a whim, I decided to go out to eat with him once. I thought my husband was a bit frivolous for hitting on me, but when we went out to eat, he was surprisingly kind and sincere. My impression of him changed drastically, and I started to become interested in him, which led to us dating. After we started dating, I asked him why he approached me. A few weeks after I started working at the supermarket, I saw Michelle for the first time and it was love at first sight. I decided then that I had to talk to her the next time I saw her. You can't just do nothing when you fall for someone, even if it's a customer, right? Turns out, Kyle wasn't frivolous, he was passionate about love, the kind of guy who gets tunnel vision when he likes someone. After 2 years of dating, we got married last year. We've been married for a year now, so we were thinking it might be time to start trying for kids. Then, a significant event occurred. One day, I was in agony in the bathroom. At first, I thought it was just my regular period, but the amount was abnormally heavy. I also started bleeding at times other than my period, and there was blood in my urine. You've been feeling sick a lot lately, haven't you? Are you okay? I think I'm okay, but maybe you're lacking iron. Why don't you try eating more spinach and prunes? I think nutrition is important, but it's not just that. Maybe I should get checked out at the hospital. It still hurts. When I came out of the bathroom, Kyle looked worried and spoke to me. However, my stomach started hurting again soon after, and I had to retreat back to the bathroom. Lately, this has been happening a lot. Feeling that something was definitely wrong, I decided to go to the hospital for a checkup. Some people believe they'll never get seriously ill. I was one of those people. And often, it's exactly those people who suddenly find themselves with a serious illness. I became one of those people. You have cervical cancer. Me? But I'm still young. Cancer? Cervical cancer is actually more common in younger women, starting in their late 20s. Hearing I had cancer at the age of 27, I was disheartened, feeling as if my energy was drained and my back started to hunch like an old woman's. However, the doctor gave me some hopeful news, and by the time I left the examination room, I was standing a bit straighter. But the thought of having to tell Kyle weighed heavily on me, and by the time I got home, my back was hunched over again like an old woman's. The night I found out I had cervical cancer, I was nervously eating dinner, thinking about how to tell Kyle. Trying to find the right moment, I couldn't taste my dinner and spoke less than usual. Sensing something was different, Kyle put down his bowl and chopsticks and asked me. You went to get your test results from the hospital today, right? How did it go? At Kyle's question, my heart felt as if it had been punched. I put down my bowl and chopsticks and braced myself. I have cervical cancer. Cancer? But you're so young. Cervical cancer can occur in younger people too. I don't know much about cancer, but can't they just remove it with surgery? If they remove the uterus, does that mean you can't have kids anymore? Don't worry. That's not the case. Surgery is needed, but the disease hasn't progressed too far, so they don't need to remove the whole uterus. So, even though it's cancer, treatment is possible, and I can still get pregnant. Really? That's a relief. The illness is tough, but it's a saving grace that treatment and pregnancy are possible. Hearing my words, Kyle picked up his bowl and chopsticks again, reassured. And seeing his expression, I also felt relieved and continued explaining while holding my bowl and chopsticks. Cervical cancer occurs near the entrance of the uterus, and the surgery involves cutting out a cone-shaped piece of the cervix with a laser scalpel. So, the shape will change after the surgery. Because of the change in shape, there's an increased risk of preterm birth and miscarriage. But don't worry too much. The risk increases, but it doesn't become extremely high. Hey, we're eating. Even if it's important, can we not talk about surgeries and miscarriages right now? It makes it hard to eat. Oh, sorry. Relieved by Kyle's reaction, I cheerfully continued explaining, which made him pause his meal again. I decided to continue eating quietly, but the tension was no longer present on my face. The following week, I was admitted to the hospital for surgery. It was supposed to take about 2 to 3 weeks, but that was just an estimate. Depending on the situation, I could be discharged earlier or it might take about a month. Thinking I might be hospitalized for about a month, I naturally worried about Kyle's well-being as his wife. Make sure you eat properly. Don't fall into an unbalanced diet, okay? I always eat with balance in mind. It's you who doesn't eat vegetables, right? Make sure to wake up on time in the morning and not be late for work. I'm the one who gets up earlier since my work starts sooner. You're the one who ends up being late even when I try to wake you up. No matter what I worried about, it always seemed to come back like a boomerang. It appears there's no need to worry about Kyle being on his own. Once hospitalized, I felt anxious about undergoing major surgery for the first time, and I couldn't sleep at all on the first night. The next day, sensing my anxiety, Kyle visited me and avoided talking about the illness or surgery. Right now, we're getting a lot of new student workers. A college guy started to produce, and 3 students joined the cashier team. Oh? Was one of them a freelancer? I hardly go over to the registers, so I forgot. Maybe I'll check next time. Weren't you saying the young workers tend to quit soon? Hopefully, they stick around this time. That's more of an issue with the meat section. The work there is tough, so I guess it can't be helped. I've never felt so grateful for such ordinary conversations. Talking to Kyle made me feel as if I were at home, and it helped to calm my nerves. However, on the day of the surgery, I felt overwhelmingly anxious. The nurse tried to calm my nerves with kind words, but as the time for the surgery approached, I gradually couldn't understand what she was saying due to anxiety and tension. By the time I was headed to the operating room, I started feeling so scared that I wanted to run away. But after entering the operating room and some time had passed, I realized the surgery was already over. About 6 hours had passed, but all I had were vague memories. The surgery, which I was so scared of, was over before I knew it, thanks to the general anesthesia. It was somewhat anticlimactic. Now that the surgery was over and I felt relieved, I was somewhat excited about how I would share this first surgery experience with Kyle. However, Kyle didn't visit the hospital on the day of the surgery or the day after. There was no response to my messages either. Why wouldn't he at least send a message? 5 days after the surgery, just as I was starting to feel annoyed, Kyle finally visited the hospital. How are you feeling? Wow, you look much better than I thought. How long do you think it's been since the surgery? You didn't reply to any of my messages. I'm alone at home now, so I have to take care of everything while working, you know? I planned to contact you, but I always end up falling asleep. Well, that's okay. It looks like I'm recovering smoothly, and it doesn't seem like I'll be hospitalized for a month. That's good to hear. Are you getting enough nutrition? After surgery, your body is weak, so you should eat soft leafy vegetables like Napa cabbage or cabbage, which are high in water content. Make sure to eat them. I eat what's given to me at the hospital, so there's not much choice there. I had planned to express all my dissatisfaction about Kyle not visiting the hospital, but his words reminded me of the inconvenience I was causing him, and I couldn't bring myself to say anything harsh. While Kyle is capable of living on his own, that doesn't mean it's not a burden. I felt a strong desire to be discharged as soon as possible. However, after that visit, Kyle stopped coming to see me again. Even when I contacted him, there was still no reply, as usual. I understand that work and household chores can be overwhelming, but over a week passed without any response from Kyle. How are you feeling? Is discharge still a ways off? Wait a minute. I get that work is busy and household chores are tough, but over a week without any word is too much, isn't it? No, I've been feeling off myself. Where? You look perfectly fine to me. It's not that I feel sick or anything. Kyle started fidgeting as if he was holding back from going to the bathroom, his hands covering his lower half. He seemed uncomfortable, but I was curious about what he meant by feeling off, so I asked directly. Why are you holding yourself like that? Did something happen? Well, I've got something like a rash down there. You what? That sounds like... I couldn't help but suspect that he might have caught a disease from somewhere, and my gaze towards Kyle became suspicious. He immediately understood what I was thinking and started making excuses. Don't get the wrong idea. It's not like that. Guys can get rashes from sweat and chafing. I just didn't want to say anything because it's embarrassing and I didn't want you to think I'm dirty. Really? You haven't been doing anything you shouldn't have, right? Of course not. It's hard to imagine he'd start an affair while his wife was in the hospital undergoing surgery. Believing in Kyle's words, I decided to trust him. I'll trust what you're saying, Kyle, but just to be safe, you should get it checked out at the hospital. It's fine. It's just skin down there, right? If I improve my protein metabolism with vitamin B6, the rash should disappear. I'll just eat some bananas and stay quiet. No, you need to see a doctor. No way. It's embarrassing to have that area examined. Kyle started fidgeting again, possibly due to itching, his hand moving around his lower half. While I think he should see a doctor, I don't know much about men's issues down there. If Kyle says it's okay, then it must be okay. Not wanting to talk about such matters in the hospital, I decided not to bring up the topic anymore. Another week passed. Still no word from Kyle, and the next time he came to the hospital was just before I was discharged. Hey, I've come to pick you up. Oh, are you the doctor? My wife has been in your care. As I was receiving instructions for aftercare from the doctor, Kyle arrived. Since he hadn't visited me at all, I saw it as a good opportunity for payback. Doctor, listen to this. My husband has developed a rash down there and refuses to see a doctor because he's embarrassed. He thinks he can cure it by eating vegetables. Hey, we don't need to talk about that right now. A rash? That does sound concerning. What does it look like? At first, it was like prickly heat, but lately, it's gotten worse, kind of bumpy, almost like cauliflower, I guess. That's something that should be checked out immediately. See, the doctor says you should get it checked out right now. Today's the day my wife is being discharged, and we have a lot to discuss at home. I'll get it checked tomorrow or sometime after. Make sure you do. It's important to get it checked out soon. Now that the doctor had insisted, Kyle had no choice but to go to the hospital, no matter how embarrassing or reluctant he was. Though I felt a bit embarrassed discussing Kyle's issue with the doctor, the embarrassment was surely greater for him. Serves him right. Feeling somewhat lighter, I left the hospital with Kyle. Though I had been hospitalized for only about 3 weeks, it felt like I hadn't been home in much longer. Excited to be back, I energetically plopped down on the living room sofa, my usual spot. Instead of sitting next to me, Kyle sat across the table, facing me. Michelle, there's something important I need to talk about. What? Oh, you did say you had a lot to talk about when you got back, didn't you? Yeah. I want a divorce. What? Why all of a sudden? After the surgery and being discharged, still needing treatment, Kyle dropped a bombshell I hadn't anticipated. I was so stunned by his words that I became speechless, my mind a whirlwind of confusion. Kyle continued to explain, trying to clear up my confusion. Remember I mentioned a new cashier started? I've fallen for her. It happened while you were hospitalized, so I decided to tell you once you were discharged. I thought it might affect your recovery if you were stressed. No, isn't this too sudden and too one-sided? It's not like I did anything wrong, right? Yeah, that's right. You haven't done anything wrong. It's just that I've found someone I love more than you. Please understand. Hearing Kyle's words made my head spin. I knew Kyle's love was passionate and intense, focusing solely on the person he loves without seeing anything else around him. But I never thought that this kind of love would continue after marriage, leading him to pursue someone new straight away. The new cashier started around the time I was hospitalized, right? So, you were having an affair with her? That's why you never visited me at the hospital. Did you catch your illness from her? Don't get it wrong. Indeed, I didn't go to the hospital because I fell for her. But we haven't started dating yet. We decided to wait until I had broken up with you properly. So, there's been nothing physical between us. Kyle looked at me with clear, earnest eyes. He probably wasn't lying, and wanting to date someone he likes after breaking up with me does seem fair. However, it's overwhelmingly unreasonable. Kyle is romanticizing his actions through a filter of passion, but it boils down to him wanting to switch to someone he deems better than me. What's the name of this person you've fallen for? Kelly. She's a student, right? How old is she? 19. Is she your type? I didn't fall for her because of her face, but I think she's pretty. So, it was as I thought. Men's thoughts are simple. Younger and prettier is better. Even so, looking at passionate and straightforward traits from a distance, they seem so disheartening. I feel embarrassed now for having been pleased with Kyle's passionate love. I'm okay with divorcing a husband who justifies his shady actions with passionate love. But divorce isn't as simple as saying goodbye like in a romance. There's a lot we need to discuss. I understand your point, but you can't just decide on a divorce right now, can you? Let's talk about it. Why? No matter how much we talk, my feelings won't change. Just give up and let's get a divorce. It's not about that. Divorce isn't something you can just do on a whim, right? If the love is gone, we can't stay married, can we? You're not planning to do something to Kelly, are you? I won't do anything. Well, maybe she'll have to be involved in our discussions. So, you were gathering information about her, planning to harm her, by asking her name and age. Kyle's eyes remained clear and sincere. He must think he's some kind of hero, protecting the one he loves. Being proposed a divorce for such an unreasonable reason already irritated me, but being treated as if I'm some monster in his path of love made me even more furious. If he says one more thing to irritate me, I'm sure I won't be able to hold back. You know you're at a higher risk of early childbirth and miscarriage after your surgery for cervical cancer, right? That's basically the same as being infertile. No value in a woman who's infertile. I'm gonna remarry a cute 19-year-old. Kelly won't have any problem having kids. Kyle stepped on a massive landmine. These were words that should never be said, not here, not anywhere. I'll pack my bags. I decided not to have any discussions and leave the house. If only Kyle had become a bit more rational and stopped feeling like a hero, he wouldn't have ended up regretting so much. 3 days after I left the house, the divorce was still a work in progress, but preparations were moving forward. It seemed like the divorce would be finalized smoothly. That was the plan, until a call from the hospital changed everything. I thought the call was about my health, but they wanted me to come to the hospital immediately because there was something about Kyle. The hospital wasn't aware of our ongoing divorce proceedings. Since I didn't answer calls at home, they must have called my cell phone. I thought about ignoring it, but since we were still technically married, I felt obligated to go to the hospital. Reluctantly, I decided to head to the hospital. Good, you came quickly. What happened? Is something wrong? When I arrived at the hospital, Kyle was sitting in a chair, frozen, his face pale as a ghost. Having been in a similar situation at the hospital myself, I somewhat understood. This usually means the discovery of a serious illness. Does Kyle have a serious illness? Yes. He had abnormalities in his lower body, and upon examination, it appears to be penile cancer. Cancer? My gaze shifted from the doctor back to Kyle. He must have heard it before, but hearing the word cancer again from the doctor's mouth seemed to make his body tense up even more. Is penile cancer like cervical cancer more common in younger people? No, it's more common in older individuals, over 60. It's quite rare compared to other cancers, as rare as becoming a millionaire at a casino. The chance of getting it at a young age is extremely low, like being struck by lightning in the middle of a city full of tall buildings. Is that so? Knowing Kyle had drawn such an unlucky lot, I couldn't help but let a smile slip despite understanding it wasn't a laughing matter. So rare to get such a cancer. What causes it? It's hard to say definitively, but human papillomavirus is a common cause. Yes, it's the same as cervical cancer. So, did I give cancer to Kyle? That's not necessarily the case. It can be transmitted through sexual activity, but it's also possible for men to contract it. So, it might have been transmitted from your husband to you, or both of you might have already been infected. Normally, the immune system handles it without issue, but in some cases, it can lead to cancer. Is Kyle's cancer treatable? Yes, similar to your cervical cancer, it can be treated with surgical removal. That means... I looked at Kyle's face again, and my smile widened. He hadn't noticed me laughing at him before, but this time he caught me. What are you laughing at? Sorry, I just couldn't help it. Doctor, does removal mean the whole thing? No, considering the progression, it will be a partial removal. What does that mean for having children? There won't be any issues with having children. However, there might be a decrease in reproductive function, and we'll try our best, but the shape might change. Doctor, just go ahead and remove it all. What's wrong with you? Why have you been like this? Kyle, perhaps irritated, tried to stand up and confront me. But his legs gave out due to the shock, and he collapsed to his knees. Despite this, his anger and frustration didn't subside, and he continued to yell at me while looking up from the ground. The doctor, unaware of our plans to divorce, looked perplexed at our exchange. He watched silently as I laughed, holding my stomach, and Kyle, yelling at me. Kyle had planned to leave me for a young and pretty 19-year-old. He must have been looking forward to it. Now, for his pleasure, he has encountered trouble in the most crucial part. He pointed out the increased risk of early childbirth and miscarriage due to my surgery for cervical cancer, but now Kyle also faces risks to his reproductive function. Doctor, we're getting divorced, so there's no need to contact me about my husband's illness. Well then, you take care now. Make sure you listen to the doctor and take your treatment seriously. I left the hospital feeling amused by the story I had heard. All that's left is to finalize the divorce as quickly as possible. However, the illness caused a bit of a stir in our divorce proceedings. A week after learning about Kyle's illness, my phone rang again. It was Kyle, so I thought it was about the divorce, but it turned out to be something else. Please! Let's pretend the divorce talk never happened. Why all of a sudden? We've come this far, why now? When I told her about my illness, Kelly dumped me. Seriously? My smile widened again. But this time, since it was over the phone, I didn't have to worry about being yelled at for laughing. I had somewhat anticipated this outcome. Kyle tends to go off the rails when it comes to love, and a 19-year-old's love can be impulsive. That's probably why their gears meshed so well together. However, after hearing about Kyle's illness, this Kelly seemed to have regained her composure. It was much like when I was freed from the spell of Kyle's love for an unreasonable reason. At 19, the choices are plentiful, so it was probably easier for her to break free from the spell than it was for me. Having regained her composure, Kelly, like me, appears to have easily discarded Kyle. With this kind of genital illness, no one will marry you. We're not divorced yet. Can't we start over, go back to square one? We're both people with the same concerns about having children, right? Let's support each other and live together going forward. So, you just want any young and pretty girl, huh? Don't say that. Work is tough. Everyone at the store knows about our divorce talks and me dating Kelly. If I'm dumped by both you and Kelly, I'd be too embarrassed to keep working. I don't care about that. Why don't you just find another job then? And don't call me anymore unless it's about the divorce. Wait! Don't be so cold. Please reconsider. I thought it was a pointless call and hung up, ignoring Kyle's pleading words. It's about time to go shopping for dinner. I decided to head to a supermarket that wasn't the one where Kyle works. Afterward, our divorce was finalized. Kelly, who had been dating my ex-husband, dumped him and quit her cashier job at the supermarket. I have no idea where she went. She's probably erased the incident with my ex-husband from her mind and is living her usual life somewhere else. However, unlike a student who can easily reset their environment, my ex-husband doesn't have that luxury. For now, he seems to be continuing to work as a supermarket employee. But, since Kelly apparently spilled everything to everyone around, my ex-husband seems to be working under the scrutiny and gossip of his coworkers. I imagine he'll find the environment too uncomfortable and will probably change jobs eventually. Also, since Kelly was just a girlfriend, a simple goodbye was all it took to end things with her. However, with my ex-husband and me, it was a divorce. Divorces require explaining the reasons to family members. I told my ex-husband's parents everything about why we divorced without holding anything back. Naturally, his parents were furious. The news spread to relatives, and it seems he's feeling out of place not just at work but among family members as well. As a result, my ex-husband has become completely isolated. He will soon start treatment for his illness. Fighting an illness alone must be hard, but it's his own doing, so I hope he manages on his own. I've returned to work after my surgery and am recovering well. I'm still 27, so I'm hopeful for a good encounter in the future. Until then, I plan to focus on my work.